Welcome in to the late night Gamecock show. Tonight is April 16th, 2025. We are just a couple short few days away from getting to the spring game. And unfortunately, the spring game is about the only thing that Gamecock fans can be optimistic about right now. It's been a pretty tough couple of days, just honestly a crappy week for the Gamecocks. But Alex, how are you doing outside of having to report on Gamecock sports right now?
Yeah, the news the past 2 days hasn't been the best for men's basketball. I think we kind of saw the Murray Bulls one news coming just from where he was being projected, but then the news today that was a little that was a little surprise. But we'll talk about it all here, and we'll see kind of talk about where they can go to next. But you got some positive things, got some spring footballs in this week, so you got the spring game, a lot of things to talk about there as well.
Yeah, just baseball gets swept. Softball loses 2 out of 3 over the weekend. Softball loses to Clemson on a walk-off last night. Colin Murray Boyles goes pro. Trayson Eaglestaff, who was like the recruit that the Gamecocks got through the transfer portal, decommits seemingly in the middle of the night and
Yeah.
just posts on Instagram that he's decommitted. Then you have over the weekend Malaysia Fulwiley. She is transferring out of the Gamecocks women's program. So we're going to talk about all of that and more on the show tonight. But Alex, how about you go ahead and roll that intro video and we'll get started.
Welcome to the Late Night Gamecock Show from Chief Sports South Carolina. Here are your hosts, Matt Anderson and Alex Jones of thebigspur.com.
So, Alex, I guess let's just rip the Band-Aid off. We'll start with men's basketball. All right, so just to recap, Colin Murray Boyles declared for the NBA draft earlier on today. Look, it's different than how it used to be. It used to be if you declared and you signed with an agent, you were 100% locked into the draft. Well, now all of these kids have agents. They have agents in high school. They have agents that negotiate NIL. So we'll see what happens with Colin. I would say it's 98% that he keeps his name in the NBA draft, but you don't know. We'll see what happens when he gets his draft grades back, when he goes to the combine. I can't tell you there's still money for Colin Murray Boyles of South Carolina if he would elect to come back. But I don't think that Colin Murray Boyles leaving the program had anything to do with the decommitment we'll talk about today. But Alex, before we go there, just your thoughts on Colin Murray Boyles and if this is it for him. This is all we got out of Colin for 2 years.
Yeah, I think you could almost see it coming a little bit. Just you look around at the projections, and you and I've kind of talked about all it takes is one team to land, to want them in that lottery. And I think that you saw like maybe some projections are having around that 10 position right now in that 15 to 10 spot. And you and I kind of talked about how if he gets to that 20 mark and 20 and beyond, like maybe the chance of him coming back go up, remain positive. But I think it just got to the point where maybe there's some feedback that he's getting that they like where they stand with some teams early in that lottery picks. I think with him, it's just some of these NBA teams just see what he was able to do this year with really all the attention on him. I think a lot of people talk about, can he get that perimeter shot more consistent? And I think, NBA teams just kind of see, well, we'll get him in here and then we'll figure out the shot and we'll kind of produce it here. And so we'll see, we'll see what happens. But he was an incredible player, a guy who you can always talk about was an unselfish player. So unselfish that they kind of had to tell him to quit being so unselfish and be selfish later in the season just because he was the guy who was doing all the scoring. So, great player, and you wish him the best in the NBA. And that's, it's a good thing to have a guy from South kind of go into the NBA because now you got a few. You got Gigi Jackson. You're going to have Colin Murray Boyles. You're going to have AJ Lawson, who's just, upgraded to a 2-year contract with the Toronto Raptors. So that's a good thing when you look at it from that standpoint. You get another player in the NBA.
Yeah, and more players that have been drafted. PJ Dozier got drafted. Sindarius Thornwell got drafted. Even Dwayne Notice spent some time in the NBA. I'm blanking on the other kid. Gosh, what is his name? The light-skinned, freckled
Hassani
kid.
Gravett was in the G League for a little while. I
Yeah,
think he
Hassani
actually got in the
Gravett.
NBA for a little bit too. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. And then obviously Chris Silva and
Yeah.
Mike Kotsar are still having a great career overseas. But with Colin, I can tell you that it wasn't a money thing. It wasn't anything like that. It was very seriously the fact that right now he's being projected to be a lottery pick. And if you're a lottery pick, you're not going to be in the G League because they've invested capital in you. So we'll see what happens. I know that he had some people in his camp that just said, look, you can't turn this down. It was nothing against South Carolina. And Colin thought really, really hard about staying at South Carolina. So wish him the best. I've seen some Draymond Green comparisons for him, like a light Draymond Green. He has all the skill sets that NBA teams like, and he's still so young. I do know that if he had come back for another year at South Carolina, based on what he had been told by his agents and professional teams talking to his agent, that it was unlikely he would drop in the draft. So it wasn't a situation where I have to go now to make sure I get drafted in the first round. It wasn't that at all. So
yeah, and
go ahead.
I think that's kind of was the thought too. Is just like, if he does come back, he wasn't going to fall just because if teams are going to pick him now without the shot being consistent, they would still pick him next year. I think it's just getting to the point too when you look at these projections, it's just a little bit too high in the draft right now for him to stay.
Yeah, and look, the Gamecocks lost Trayson Eagle staff today. Kind of happened in the middle of the night. I heard there was a late night phone call that occurred last night, maybe into the early morning. I think that you're going to hear from Trayson's camp that, well, Colin Murray Boyles went pro, not sure about the supporting cast, but I don't buy that. When he was brought into South Carolina and committed, he was sold on being the man, the guy that's going to shoot 15 shots a game and score in buckets and really put himself in a situation to be on the NBA radar because he's not on there right now. I don't know if he's going to go to West Virginia. I don't know if he's going to go to Kentucky, but I don't view this as a situation where, I have cold feet about playing at South Carolina. I know that he got a really good deal from South Carolina. I don't know the exact number, but I would say it was somewhere between 800,000 and 1.2 million. And I think that what happened here, especially if you see him go to West Virginia, if he goes to West Virginia, I think that he just got a bigger bag. But that's purely conjecture on my part. I don't know that for 100% fact, but just, reading the tea leaves. And if he goes to Kentucky, look, that's back-to-back years that Lamont Paris has lost a commitment via transfer portal or the recruiting class to Kentucky and Mark Pope. And let's be honest, South Carolina, he probably had the opportunity to get 12 to 15 shots up a game, maybe score, 12 to 18 points a game, but he's elected for something different. So I don't think that we need to shed too many tears for someone we hardly knew.
Yeah, I think the one thing you look forward to seeing with him in the South Carolina offense was, when you look back to this past season, there were so many open shots that were missed. I mean, Lamont Paris' system kind of helped get some guys open, and guys like Colin Murray Boyles finding guys on the wing or in the corner for threes, and the shots weren't falling. I think you would hope that Trayson Eagle's staff is going to come in and be the guy who can knock down those shots to open up more of the offense. But we'll see what they can do. Obviously, now with the 5 spots open, there's still a lot they have to get in to fill those 5 spots. I know we're going to dive into that a little bit too, but we'll see what they're able to do in the portal now.
Yeah, looking at the roster, Alex, you have 3 guards that are on the roster for next year. Michi, Eli Ellis, and then Kobe Knox. You have 2 wings and Miles Studi and Grant Polk. Everyone knows who Studi is. Grant Polk's a freshman that can evidently really shoot it. And then you have 5 bigs in Elijah Strong, Chris Isundaka, Jordan Butler, EJ Walker, and Hayden Asamian. And Simeon. Yeah, I suck at that. But so, I mean, you're talking about 10 scholarship players right now. And as Alex just mentioned, you have 5 roster spots open. You have 5 bigs, but how many of them do you actually think are starting caliber SEC players at this point, Alex? And then we'll move on to guards, but just let's start with bigs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those 5 spots needs to go to see if you can find a starting big. Like Chris Essendanko, I think has the potential. I think it's just I still want to kind of find out more about what happened this past season because he was pretty good his freshman season at St. Joe's. Like, I think he's got potential, and if that can be your number 2 option or whatever, like I think that's pretty good at that 5 spot. But I think you see what you can find from a big man portal in the portal as well.
Yeah, you have 5 bigs. With Elijah Strong, I see a lot of things that I like, but I also know he's only a sophomore, so he's going to be a junior next year. Can he elevate his game? Potentially. I think Chris can elevate his game. I think Jordan Butler can elevate his game. Then you have EJ and Hayden who are coming in as freshmen. They're going to take some time to adjust, but I love their raw skills and their ability. After that, how many bigs can you take though? You know what I mean? Like at some point, like you got to have some wings. And for so long, I thought that the Gamecocks were going to take, 1 or 2 more point guards. I'd hoped that Colin was going to come back, but I didn't feel like he would. But at that point, on the wings, you only have, call Kobe Knox whatever you want, a guard or a wing. But regardless, you only have 5 for the guards in the wing position. And I don't think you can really count on Grant Polk to do much next year, just as a freshman. Maybe he can knock down some shots. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But, I think he's going to be a player that might score 1,000 points at South Carolina, but it's going to be in his sophomore, junior, and senior season. With Michi, he's going to start. I would imagine that Miles Studi is going to start. And, look, we still don't know if Miles Studi is going to be on the team next year. We feel pretty confident, but he has to get that medical hardship. So I guess go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask now with the Colin Murray Bulls and Eagle staff news, like we talked last week about top priority in the portal was point guard. Do you still feel that way with this team right now, or do you think that's changed a little bit now with the news that these past 2 days?
With the news of the past 2 days, Alex, I think you almost have to say, okay, we have 5 spots. 3 of them are going to go to the best available player we can get. Yeah. I don't care if they're a guard, a wing, or a big. You got to go get 3 guys. Those other 2 spots, a lot of coaches around South Carolina and people I've talked to, not necessarily, Lamont, I'm not saying that, but like coaches that have talked to Lamont and, they feel like he feels pretty good about Michi. Michi's been in his system. He learned from what he did as a sophomore and then as a junior. He moved off the ball because obviously he had Talon, but they feel okay about Michi and Eli. Is that correct? I don't know. I'm not sitting there and watching game film with them and figuring out at practice what they're being asked to do. But yeah, I think this year you have to use all 5 of your scholarship spots that are open right now.
Absolutely.
And you got to go find 3 guys. I know that there's plenty of money still available for South Carolina, especially with losing Trayson. And look, I don't know if you saw this today, Alex, but I was just perusing the World Wide Web. And 81% of players that have elected for the portal so far are still available.
Yeah.
So only 19% of them have committed anywhere. So there are a lot of names out there. And I don't want to say it's a game of chicken, but it is a game of, all right, we got 5 spots. We got X amount of $1 million. How can we best spend them? And then the good thing for Gamecocks right now, and people aren't going to want to hear it, but you still have enough money to say, okay, is it going to take an extra $200K to get you here? Is it going to take an extra $100K to get you here? They're kind of sitting. I don't know if you've ever done like a fantasy football draft, Alex. I know you've never done one. We've talked about this, but they have like auction or salary cap leagues.
Right.
And basically like the first 20 picks, you just let everyone spend all their money. And then you just spend $2 more, $3 more, $4 more than anybody else can spend. And that might be the situation the Gamecocks are in right now. So
yeah, and the portal closes next weekend. So guys you can look on Twitter, guys are still entering the portal every day. And that's not me trying to downplay the last 2 days. Like the last 2 days of news for the men's basketball team hasn't been good. Like we said, the Murray Bulls news like that, you can kind of see maybe potentially coming, and there was obviously the chance of him coming back, but you could still very much see the possibility that he would leave. But the Eagle staff news like that, that was a tough blow for that team because of he's a really good player. And right now, like, he's one of the best available players in their portal. So, I mean, that was a blow to the transfer portal class, obviously. But, as you mentioned, there's still a lot of players out there and still a lot of players that are going in. And just because the portal closed doesn't mean you can't sign the guys that are in. Just you got to be in the portal before that thing closes. So, we'll see what they're able to do. But I kind of agree that 3 at least, just go to whoever the best available that you can sign, and maybe 4. Kind of depends on who you get. I think depends on those best available, but we'll see what they're able to do.
Yeah, and we're gonna move on from men's basketball after this, but Maddox asked, any idea who Eli was talking about in his tweet about who may be coming? I don't. I love Eli. He is a feisty guy, and he has such a big social media presence that it really does matter when he posts. A lot of people see it. So he might be talking about somebody. He might be, throwing chum in the water for sharks to come. So we'll see what happens there. And then Quantrell asked, would Carolina go after the Elon transfer Nick Dorn, 6'7" athletic wing who can score? Sounds like a Lamont Paris special, and I don't mean that sarcastically. I haven't heard him specifically linked to South Carolina at this point, but definitely Quantrell, it could happen. And then Steven says after next year, Lamont Paris will be fired. I think it's kind of hard to fire him after, it'd be 4 seasons and one of them being an NCAA tournament and SEC Coach of the Year. But there's no doubt about it. There is a lot of pressure on Lamont Paris and the staff to close out and get the players on the roster that they want. I don't think anybody was doing cartwheels when BJ Mack and Talon Cooper came to South Carolina a couple of years ago, and we'll see. I trust Lamont because I think he did a really good coaching job this year. I think it's the best coaching job he's done in his career, and SEC is going to be weaker next year. Alex and I will talk about the SEC. We don't have to do it right now for next season. We'll let all the transfer portal stuff run through, and we'll get there. But women's basketball, Alex, before we move on to baseball and softball, from a women's basketball standpoint, I'm not going to say that, Malaysia Fawali leaving the program was a surprise. I don't think it was expected 2 months ago, expected a month ago. But with, bringing in Latson and then the way that Malaysia's been, her minutes over the past couple of years, she might want something more. It's interesting though, Alex, because she does have an Under Armour NIL deal, and maybe that limits the school she can go to. But I think that it's not addition by subtraction, but it's also not. It's definitely addition on the roster, but I'm not saying Malaysia is the reason for the addition by subtraction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, you also got to think about, you got Raven Johnson coming back to that spot. So I think, maybe that was a little bit that went into it too, because, Raven was mainly getting the starter minutes there. So, but I think the Latson addition was big, and that's something that, she's the top scorer in the country. So, we'll see what they're, able to do, or what that, I'm really excited to see what she's able to do, because I think she can really flourish in that South Carolina offense.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what happens with Malaysia, because her and Dawn have a great relationship. Like, South Carolina is helping her in her transfer portal process. They're trying to help her, and they're talking to other coaches and finding the best landing spot for her. And she's a Columbia kid. And look, it didn't work out at South Carolina for her to leave after 2 seasons, but hey, she won a national championship and she was a human highlight reel. South Carolina did a lot for her brand, and she's going to go capitalize on it somewhere else, and we wish her the best. But like you said, Alex, like, this roster for the women is still absolutely fine. It's still a top 1, 2, 3, 4, probably closer to 1 roster in the country. And they're still in on some other ones. Alex, can you quickly remind me of who the guard is they're after? And then there's also a center from Mississippi State they're after. A guy,
you got
and then
Neekins, who was really good at Utah. That's one to, I think, keep an eye on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a got as well. So they're going to reload. Don already talked about transfer stuff. So we'll see what happens there. But moving on to baseball, Alex, I don't know if you realize this, but baseball and softball are combined 2-6 over their last 8 games. Softball, winning one on the road this past weekend, and then the Gamecocks dropping all three on the road at Texas A&M. And then we talked about it at the top of the show, but Clemson won in a walk-off last night against the softball team in Clemson, and baseball team did beat the Citadel 4-0 yesterday. As far as softball goes, Alex, we'll start there. I think softball is still on solid ground. I'm not going to freak out over this. They played a tough schedule.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much to worry about. You played really good defense in that game last night, and I mean Clemson's a good team too. Like it's just one of those where you went to their place and they're just able to get you. So it's just one of those you had your chances, but now you just kind of get ready for the weekend now and move on. It. I don't think obviously there's nothing to worry about there with that team.
Yeah, I guess it's time to talk about the weekend in Texas A&M. Looking at it, Alex, it was Thursday to Saturday, so it was the first Thursday to Saturday series of the season. It was on the road. I thought on Thursday night the Gamecocks battled really hard. I thought they had a chance to win the game in 9 innings. And look, that guy made an absolutely amazing catch for A&M over in left field to rob a home run. I think that was from Kazmar. And an opportunity for the Gamecocks to take a 1-run lead going into the bottom of the 9th. As it ends up, Gamecocks lost in the bottom of the 10th on a solo shot, a no-doubter. Yeah. But I don't think even after Friday, either of us anticipated what would happen, or on Thursday, what would happen on Friday. Did you get to watch much of that game, Alex?
Yeah, I did. I kind of just what I was talking about with the softball team. It's just that had your opportunities in that game. I was talking about the Thursday game. You had your opportunities in that game, and you really South Carolina obviously needed that one because Texas A&M was coming off. Had a lot of momentum coming off that Tennessee series, and you give them that game an extra inning win in that Thursday game, and I mean they obviously took that momentum into the Friday game as well as we saw.
Yeah, that Friday game, I'll be honest, I was on a trip with my wife for her birthday, so I did not watch any of the Friday game. Listened to bits and pieces of it, but didn't get to see any of it. But 17-0 and lose in 7 innings, I don't think I missed much. From what I can tell and talking to folks is it might have been the worst performance of the season for the Gamecocks, and that's saying something. And their effort was definitely questioned by numerous people. And not much more to say about that. But then you get to Saturday, Alex, and I was on the way home from a trip, and I was listening to Derek and Stu call the game, and you're up. I think it was 11-1 or 12-2 in the 6th inning, and you're sitting there saying, well, at least me, I was like, well, I got 45 minutes left on my ride. Like, I don't want this game to end right now. I want to keep listening, score some more runs. And you thought that 10-run lead was going to hold, but it didn't. And Alex, like I told you, like I went out to dinner with my wife's family for her birthday, and I texted you from the dinner table, like they lost. So tell us how it happened, Alex.
So I was at the tennis match that day on Saturday, and kind of saw the score where South Carolina was pretty close to getting it to where it was going to be a run rule victory. As you said, the next thing I know, Texas A&M's coming back, and it's just that can't happen. Like from an SEC team, like you should be able to lock that down. It be it one from a run rule victory if you're that close, and then you just let your pitching just kind of lets that get away. I mean, 2 grand slams in the 9th inning, like it just can't happen. And offensively, they won last night against Citadel, but the offense, it wasn't quite there again last night either. You had 1 run, or you had 4 runs in those first 3 innings, and you didn't get a hit the rest of the game. Like the pitching was really good last night. They did what they had to do, but the offense it's got to get going. And we're getting late into the season here, but I mean that's it. I don't know. That was just not a good look on that Sunday game, and then we'll see. And it's not going to be easy this weekend again either.
Yeah, and look, JV and John have talked all about this so far this week. I just don't want to regurgitate what they've said. It's accurate. There's definitely frustration creeping in from the inside and the outside of the baseball program, and I don't know what the answer is. I think everyone is searching for an answer. But like Jamie said, like Whittle said, this team is better than the sum right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why the Gamecocks are, like 2 wins in the SEC and, struggling just a little bit above 500 at this point. It doesn't get much easier. You have a home series this weekend. It's another Thursday through Saturday. Ole Miss is coming to town, number 11 in the country. So you'll have Thursday night, and then Friday night, you'll have a Friday game, and you'll also have the Gamecock football spring game. And then Saturday, you hope that the Gamecocks have found a way to, win at least one of those first 2 games and have a chance to win an SEC series. But as John said today or yesterday on the show, it has the opportunity to get ugly, even uglier. And that's not good for South Carolina. I think that it's embarrassing how many leads or close games have been blown in the last 3 innings, 7, 8, 9 for South Carolina this year.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And look, I don't think it's quite time to talk about firing Palmineri, but you're seeing that. You're seeing it on social media. You're seeing it on the Big Spur. I'm sure you're seeing it on Gamecock Central. I'm sure you're seeing it at the water cooler at work, talking to your Gamecock buddies. But that's a $7 million decision to get rid of Palmineri and the assistant coaches. And I don't think Palmineri forgot how to coach baseball. I think you got to give him at least more than 1 year, but I think you are seeing the rust of not coaching for 3 years come into play for South Carolina this year. But I think you got to stick with him. Alex, thoughts?
Yeah, it's just there's a lot that's got to be figured out, and a lot that probably should already be figured out at this point in the season. But you mentioned it, like just some of the leads that have been blown, like the offense just not being there a lot of times. Like last night, it was kind of one of those games where it was good to see them win for the team to get the win, but it's the offense still wasn't there. Like didn't get a hit past the 4th inning or 4th or 3rd inning. I can't remember which one it was, but we'll see I'm interested to see what they're able to do this weekend at home against Ole Miss.
Yeah, and Will Crow had some good things to say today. If you haven't caught Will, he's fantastic on the morning show with Jamie, and he just said sometimes getting back to your home field, sleeping in your own bed, stay in your own showers, your own weight room, your own locker room, maybe you can turn it around. And I thought that Stuart Lake, Coach Lake, had a really good point last week when he said, you're playing Texas A&M, you're trying to turn the season around. And the season in baseball isn't over until it's over. So baseball is a funny sport. I don't know if they're going to find a way to make a run. I don't know, but it would take almost like a yin and a yang approach to get there. Complete opposite of what they've been doing so far. But look, Gamecock fans are resilient. They're tough. They're going to be here. They're going to keep supporting the team. But it's getting quite loud around the baseball program. But Alex, with that being said, let's go ahead and hit a sponsor break, and then let's talk about something more exciting, the spring game coming up on Friday.
Mike here for one of the better dining options in the capital city. When I first moved there, I asked people around the radio station, where are the best wings? Well, the consensus was D's Wings. That was then. Today, they still have the best wings, but it's so much more. Now in their new location at 415 Meeting Street in West Columbia, yeah, they get voted the best wings on a routine basis. Yes, they get voted the best sports bar on a routine basis, but they're not just about wings, and really, they're not just a sports bar. It is a family-run local restaurant and bar with 20 TVs and 25 beers on tap. And how about these daily specials? Every Monday night at D's, you've got 75-cent wings from 4 until closing. Tacos on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, 18 wings and a pitcher of beer for $29. You've also got ribs and oyster bucket specials on Thursday. And no matter how big the party is, 20 or more, no problem. Just call ahead of time and they'll take terrific care of you. They'll do takeout as well. And guess what? A human will answer the phone and take the order. Billy and his staff do an outstanding job. Check out D's 415 Meeting Street in West Columbia.
Welcome back into the Late Night Gamecock Show. My name is Matt Anderson, and as always, Alex Jones is here with me. We love D's Wings. I know that Coach Lake and Mike Morgan had lunch at D's today, had some time catching up, and maybe Alex and I will get to do it this weekend because the spring game is coming. 7:30 p.m. is the start time on Friday, correct, Alex?
Yes.
So you got 7:30. Spring game admission is free. Most of the parking around the stadium is free. I think that if you get there earlier, you'll have a better shot. I think parking lot opens at 3 or 3:30 around the stadium, and then there's some paid parking closer to kickoff. One thing, Alex, no TV. So if you wanna be there, or if you want to watch it or see it or know what we're going to be talking about next week, make sure you get to Williams-Brice Stadium, get to Columbia, and check it out. So before we talk about the actual game, Alex, I know there's so much frustration that the game's not on TV this year, but just to remind everyone, the SEC gave the opportunity for them to have a all access type hour-long show on their network or have the spring game. And pretty much every SEC team picked the hour-long all access. I think that's good because you'll still be able to cut up the spring game and put it on highlights, put it on Instagram. You can still show that to recruits. Recruits will still be in the stadium. We'll talk about all of them that we know of here in a little bit. But Alex, look, if every SEC team isn't doing a televised spring game, why the hell would we? Or why the hell would South Carolina? Why are you going to put anything on tape?
Yeah, just at that point, it wouldn't be smart to do it just if nobody, because then it's just a competitive advantage thing. Obviously, as we're going to talk about, there's not going to be much shown from a game plan standpoint. It's going to be pretty vanilla as you could expect. But if nobody else is going to do it, we'll watch South Carolina do it.
Yeah, and I hope that they make this more fan interactive going forward. If they're going to make it where it's not on TV, try and get 40,000, 50,000, whatever, fans there throughout the day. Make it a daytime event. Maybe have some autographs. You can definitely do some NIL stuff where, hey, the wide receivers are over this part of Gamecock Park. The quarterbacks are over here. $10, $15 gets you an autographed picture, ball, whatever from any of them. So maybe that's what they'll do, because I think that, growing up, I was very fortunate. Because I was a ball boy for the basketball team. So I got to know all the players. They gave me autographs. They hung out with me when I was like on the court or in basketball camp. And the more you can do that with kids nowadays, the bigger your brand's going to get. And the more, Lenore Sellers jerseys you're going to see in the stands, and the Dylan Stewarts and the Brian Rose eventually. So hopefully they'll do something like that. But as Alex mentioned, I think the play calling is going to be pretty vanilla. I don't think you're definitely not going to see Lenore Sellers take off and run. If he does, I think he'll be promptly taken out of the game and chewed out. But Alex, what are some things you're looking for in the game? What can fans glean from being there Friday night?
Yeah, I think it's a chance for fans that are in attendance to see all the new faces that are on the team. South Carolina's got a lot of freshmen. That freshman wide receiver group is going to be one that I think a lot of people are going to be watching. But that wide receiver room as a whole is something that I'm interested to see as well. But I think one position group that I'm really interested to see is quarterbacks. Honestly, from a Lenore Sellers standpoint, you may not get to see too much just because he won't be live, as you can imagine. Like he won't. So the run aspect of his game probably you won't be able to see, but it will be interesting to see, from a throw game, like how he's continued to take a next step in the passing game. But that'd be something that's interesting to watch. But I've heard some really good things about Cutter Woods, and so I'm interested to see how he is. Aaron Nolan, everybody would get their first look at Aaron Nolan, and I think he's had a good spring as well. And that backup quarterback battle is pretty even. When you listen to Shane Beamer talk about it, it's competitive, and it's a battle in there right now. And you got Dante Reno and Luke Doty also working in there. So offensively, that's kind of what you'll see, things to watch from an offensive line perspective, since they're going to be doing a draft. Like you won't be able to just sit there and say, all right, Lenore Sellers is the quarterback. Here's the starting offensive line that's right now, because they're going to be mixing and matching. You won't really be able to do that. But you can watch some of the individual players, guys like Trovon Ball, see how he's taking the next step. Josiah Thompson going to freshman to sophomore. Guys like that, it'll be interesting to see. And then, I think, just to jump to defensively real quick, I think defensive tackles is a spot everybody wants to see as well. And then Dylan Stewart, I think it's always, fun to watch Dylan Stewart play. But, the rest of that edge room as well is going to be a key, especially now with the injury to Jalen Brown and Wendell Gregory transferring. That we'll see what they do with that edge room, but see some of those other guys play in there. Des, how is he taking the next step? And linebackers, you got Fred Johnson, who seems like kind of taking over from a leadership role. And he's a guy that I think physically has taken the year 1 to year 2 step, and he was already a really big guy and looked like he was ready to go last year and could have played last year if he didn't have those guys in front of him. So, Friday there's going to be a lot of interesting players to watch and see what we can pick up, but should be a pretty fun night.
And Alex, I think another thing to point out is you've seen these guys way more recently than anybody else has. You and Whittle and Hale, you've been around the program since the bowl game, and you've been around, you've talked to them, you've seen them, you've interviewed them, you've talked to the coaches. I think that what's going to be shocking for a lot of people that go to the spring game is just to see the size of some of these players. It's very apparent that the strength and conditioning program is paying off, the nutrition is paying off. South Carolina, especially over the last year or two, in my estimation, looks like a football team getting off the bus. It looks like a team that has big, powerful dudes. Would you agree with that? And have you seen anybody bulk up or anything along those lines?
Yeah, one of the guys, Fred Johnson, I just mentioned, is one that just kind of caught my attention. Got Russell Faison looks like a guy who a first off the bus kind of guy, and I think the line of scrimmage you're really seeing that South Carolina's recruited so well, high school ranks wise on the offensive line, and that's a group that physically looks really good, and it really is the whole, as you mentioned, the whole team I think is continues to take steps physically, and they continue to do a great job in that strength and conditioning program, getting those guys ready. And I think you really saw that last year with the group, and I think they've continued to get bigger and stronger. A guy like Jerron Willis, who a guy he's going to be one to watch in that linebacker room, because you think of guys like Fred and Justin Okoronkwo and Sean Murphy, but Jerron Willis has really kind of bulked up as well, and so that'll be the first opportunity for a lot of the fans to see those guys and see how they look.
Yeah, and I'll go back to last summer, Alex, and we were covering a lot of the 7-on-7 camps. And we were around the actual football team a little bit. They were doing their conditioning and their strength training. And I was actually blown away by Nick Imunwari. And I mean that in the sense that I'm not surprised by him being a potential first round pick, the numbers that he put up. I mean, the dude's deltoids were the size of my head. He was a brick house. So I'm excited to see what they look like Friday night. I want to see the physicality. I want to see people hitting. And then, like you mentioned, the other thing that I'm looking for is not necessarily the wide receiver room. I think we know what we have in, Jerron Brown, Nick Harbor. They're not going to be throwing deep outs to Nick Harbor unless it's, the last couple seconds just to do something fun. But the freshman, I want to see Pup. I hope he's healthy. It'd be really fun to see Pup catch a pass from Lenore's. Brian Rowe, he's shifty. He reminds me a lot of Shaq Rowland back in the day. I'd like to see what he looks like. And then Jordan Gidron, he's a kid that should be in high school right now. He's going to be playing. Malik Clark. And when you get past the obvious starters, and like you said, it's going to be a draft, so it's going to be mixed up. It's going to be kind of backyard football to a certain extent. But we'll see what happens. And watch the one-on-one matchups like you mentioned. But moving on, Alex, from the spring game to recruiting. And recruiting, this is going to be a really, really big weekend. Looking at it, I was actually amazed at the number of, top 100 kids, top 50 kids, top 40 kids, top 20 kids that they have coming in for this spring game for 2027. And as Alex and I always talk about, the spring game, the summer, and then the football games next year really matter a lot more at this point for the 2027 kids and the 2028 kids than it does for the 2026 class. The 2026 class, these guys were coming to spring games. They were going to junior days. They were going to summer workouts. They've been around practice. They know what South Carolina is about. And we'll break all that down, the 2026 class, as we get, into the summer and we start seeing visits happen. But Alex, if you don't mind, can you run us through the 2027 guys that are going to be on campus and even some 2028s?
Yeah, so just a note off the top, this is a list that's right now, and this list, it continue to grow, as you can imagine. And then we'll even find out some more guys that are there on Saturday night. But, a few guys who are really standing out. I mean, it's, as you mentioned, a loaded 2027 group. But 3 wide receivers in state that South Carolina's offered, and Christian Jackson and Jaden Kelly Murray. And Sequel Patterson's the one that I know we've talked about on here, but right now we have him 24/7 has him ranked as the number 9 overall prospect in the country, and he's really good. I think he's going to be highly sought after in the country. And So he's one that that'll be there. And then the offensive line group, that's another really good group. Kelsey Adams is a guy who continues to just land offers out of Langston Hughes and in Atlanta. He's right now number 11 prospect in the country. And then you got Nate Carson, who's right down the road in Irmo, who's a guy who South Carolina really likes, and Joshua Sam Appel, who's from Douglasville. Like South Carolina, it looks like they put themselves in a pretty good spot here, and he's a top 50 guy, and they continue to recruit so well in the offensive line, and they're bringing in really good prospects this weekend on that front as well. And guys on the defensive end, you got Jaden Bryant coming in. You got KJ Green, who's one of the top edges in the country. And, I watched him in Carrollton at the Under Armour camp, and he was one of the guys who, shined really the brightest in that camp. He's going to be one of the top, I think, overall prospects in the country when it comes down to it. And then you kind of look to see, the guy that kind of stands out, Joshua Dobson. Saw him a few weeks ago in Charlotte at an Under Armour camp there, and he's going to be one of the top cornerbacks in the country. And I don't think – do we have him ranked right now? Yeah, he's number 24 overall in the country, number 2 cornerback. So, kind of as you mentioned, the spring game is really about bringing these, prospects in 2027, 2028 classes, because that's when those relationships start being built in. Obviously, you'll see who else from the 2026 class shows up, but a lot of the guys South Carolina continues to recruit for the 2026 class have already visited South Carolina, and then now they're more worried about those official visits coming up in the summer. And a lot of the guys South Carolina's in on, especially their top guys, are kind of focusing on committing in the summer or into August. So we'll see if they're who else from the 2026 or really even the rest of these classes show up. But as you look at right now, that's a solid group 2027 wise to be coming in.
Yeah, and as you look on the Big Spur and you start looking up these guys' rankings, remember the 27 and 28 kids, they all don't have rankings yet. Just because somebody is unranked or has 0 stars beside them doesn't mean they're a 0-star prospect.
Right.
It's a situation where just click on their profile page and look at who they visited, look who they have offers by, and you'll see why South Carolina is bringing some of these kids in. Real quick, in 2028, they do have Taru Davis Jr. coming in, a wide receiver, and defensive end Ismail Schaefer,
Yeah.
I don't know. But so 2028, I'll learn those kids' names by the time they're at least high school juniors. They're still not. Just want to do some quick highlights there. 2026, right now, Desmond Green, a mainstay at South Carolina, has been coming around. He's going to be there. Defensive tackle Brian Harris. 4-star defensive end Julian Walker, whose dad is on the staff at South Carolina on strength and conditioning. You have 3-star safety Tamarion Watkins, who anybody that's watched this kid in a camp setting film, he's not a 3-star. He might be the next Nick Emanwari. So getting him in and hopefully strengthening their position there is going to be huge. And then you have 3-star linebacker Jordan Avinger, and he doesn't have an offer right now, but he's the guy that the Gamecocks are at least showing interest in. So that's a number of names, and I think that list is going to continue to grow. Maybe some people drop off of it, but my favorite prospect on campus actually will be Sequel Patterson. I hope that they can find a way to get him into the fold sooner rather than later. But Alex, any closing thoughts? I think that's going to do it for us tonight. Obviously, we'll come back to men's basketball. When we hear something, we'll tell you. Everything is close to the vest. Like I said, 81% of the kids that have entered the portal don't have a home yet, and they still have time to add more names to it.
Yeah, and I think it's one where, it's going to be interesting. Just come back next week when we talk about the spring game to see kind of the highlights of what we saw, what we saw from the quarterbacks and every position. But there should be a lot of fun to see, what South Carolina has to show on Friday night. And then from a recruiting standpoint, that's, once the spring game's over, that spring game's always a big recruiting event, but then it really rolls into, coaches getting on the road. And then before you know it, the summer official visit weekends will be here.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And look, don't get too down on basketball. That they're going to be okay. SEC is going to be down next year. We'll see what happens. This is a Lamont Paris kind of team that he's building. And look, if it doesn't work out, then everybody knows it's not going to work out. So Don't get too down there. College basketball, especially, is a sport where you can reload quickly, and that very well could be with Lamont Paris in 2 years. Could be with Lamont Paris. You might be looking at 2 out of 3 years in NCAA tournament. So I did see a comment in here on the chat box, and it was talking about how booze don't help kids get out of slumps. Supporting them helps them get out of slumps. So I do encourage y'all, if you are going to the games, support the guys and the gals that are playing. Boos don't help anybody. Nobody would like to get booed in their workplace. Can you imagine walking into your cubicle and getting booed from 70 other people in the bullpen? Thankfully, I work from home, so I don't have to do that. But yeah, just remember, guys, try and stay positive. It really does help the program more than anything. I do want to give another quick shout out to Richard Avant. I saw him in Charleston. He tapped me on the shoulder and said that he watches the show, loves me and Alex, and loves all of the Inside the Gamecocks program. So shout out to you, Richard. Make sure that you are checking out all of the Inside the Gamecocks shows. I think today was absolutely jam-packed. You had 4 hours with the morning show and then the actual show. Then you had coffee in the morning. You had JC and Morgan. You had us. You had Tailgate Talks was released on podcast. So many ways to listen to Gamecock stuff. And a lot of the stuff is evergreen. It doesn't get old. And I promise if you listen, you're going to know something that your friend doesn't know tomorrow when you talk on the phone or see each other at work. But lastly, I do want to wish everyone a happy Easter. I hope that everyone is safe if you're traveling anywhere. And if you're at the Gamecock spring game Friday and you see me or Alex, come say hello. We love catching up with all you folks. But with that, Alex, we're going to close it out. Appreciate all of you when you spend your time with us. You give us the most valuable thing you have, your time. Never goes underappreciated or unnoticed. So we thank you. And for me and Alex, we'll be signing off and we will see you next week. Hope you all have a great evening.